Hi everyone, today I'll be going through how I edit my photos. I thought it'd be fun to just have kind of a chiller video, like an edit with me type of video of me going through my thought process while I edit my photos. And just to be clear, I definitely don't consider myself the best photo editor out there at all. This is just simply my personal approach to editing and just what works for me. But I hope it can still be helpful and maybe help you pick up a few tips along the way. So let's get into it. So for editing, I use Lightroom for iPad, which is basically the same thing as Lightroom Mobile, if I'm not wrong. I do have the premium version, which I pay monthly for, and I think it's around $7.99 per month, which honestly, I think it's a pretty reasonable price for all the features that you get. And I just love that I can do almost everything that I need right from my phone or my iPad. Speaking of which, I usually edit on my iPad Air. This is the 5th generation and it's super portable, which I love, and having the bigger screen just makes the editing experience so much nicer. And yeah, that's pretty much all I use to edit. Yeah, now let's actually get to editing. Okay, so let's start with this photo right here. Before I do anything, I straighten the image and then I crop. I'm gonna leave the foreground here because it gives the photo more depth, and we love depth. Now I'm going to go to light and then I'm going to increase the exposure because the photo is a bit dark. I don't want to increase the exposure too much because the darker tones does give the photo its mood and an intimate feel in the photo. So I'm going to only adjust it just a tiny bit, and then I'm going to increase the contrast to separate the subject, which is the woman, from the surroundings. And then I'm going to reduce the highlights because I feel like the objects in the foreground and the background, it's a bit, a bit distracting. So I'm going to reduce the highlights, increase the shadows just to make it a bit brighter, and then also reduce the whites, increase the blacks just a little bit, something like that. And then I'm going to go color. I like having a more warm feel to my photos, so I'm gonna increase the temperature a tiny bit. Vibrance, I'm gonna make it a bit more vibrant and reduce the saturation a little bit. Now I'm gonna go to the masking, which is a premium Lightroom feature, but masking does so much. So if you don't have Lightroom Premium for mobile, I would strongly recommend it for the masking because it's a game changer, really. All right, so I'm gonna add a radial gradient around the subject. I'm gonna rotate it so it doesn't touch these white objects, and I'm going to increase the exposure to make the subject stand out a little bit more. I'm going to increase the contrast, increase the highlights, and then I'm gonna go, no, I'll do that later. Yeah, for now that's okay. So that's before and after so far. And then I'm going to add a linear gradient down here. It's just very subtle. I'm just going to reduce the exposure just a little bit to put the focus more towards the subject. I'm going to do the exact same thing here. I'm going to add a radial gradient here and just reduce exposure a tiny bit. And then I'm going to select subject. Let's see if it's accurate. Okay, that's pretty accurate. I'm going to select this and then I'm going to subtract from mask 4. Select brush and then I'm going to just remove and subtract that there. And I'm just going to go effects and then I'm going to increase the clarity, which is the mid-tone contrast, and increase the texture as well. And now the woman pops out a bit more. And then now I'm going to select this radial gradient that I did earlier, and I'm going to duplicate and invert so that only the outside is selected. I'm going to expand a little bit more, and then I'm going to go to light and I'm going to increase exposure and kind of bring the focus more to the middle. I also kind of want these, might select a radial gradient. Masking is so fun. For the packages, the food packaging here, I'm going to just go color and I'm going to increase the saturation, make it pop a little bit. Yeah, so now I'm going to go to the tone curves. See, I don't always mess with the tone curves unless I feel like I really need to. Personally, I enjoy adjusting and playing around with the colors in the color mix and color grading, which most of the time it usually already gives me the result I'm after. But for this photo, I am going to mess with the tone curves. I'm going to, if you don't know how tone curves work. On the very left side are the blacks, shadows, midtones, the highlights, and then the whites. So for this photo, I'm going to increase the highlights, and then I'm going to do like a regular S-curve, but only very slight, because I don't want the contrast to be too contrasty. Increase the whites just a tiny bit more. I'm gonna go color grading, and then I'm going to make the shadows bluer, not too much, and then I'm gonna go highlights, and I'm gonna make it warmer. But then I'm going to do it again in the tone curve. So I'm going to go highlights just to get more, make it more prominent, I guess. So make the yellows, make the highlights a bit more warm, and then I'm going to make the shadows a bit more blue. Or maybe not. Actually, I just leave it like that. And then for the tint, I do like having a slight green tint in a lot of my photos. So I am going to just make the tint a bit more green. So yeah, that's basically how I would edit this photo. So that's before and that's after. So yeah, let's go to the next photo. Okay, so for the second photo, I'm going to edit this photo of a boat and a plane. As you can see, the photo is quite flat. So what I want to do is bring some colors back and also make the boat stand out a bit more. So like I did before, I'm going to straighten it, and I'm going to crop in and make the boat a bit more centered. Photo is a bit bright in the sky, so I'm going to reduce the highlights just to make the clouds, bring the details back into the sky. I'm going to also reduce the exposure. I'm actually going to leave the contrast. I'm going to increase the shadows. Keep the whites, keep the blacks. I'll just leave it like that for now. And then make the photo a bit warmer. Really depends how you want it. If you want it to have a more fresh look, I guess, you can make it cooler, but for this I'm going to make it warm. I'm going to increase vibrance and saturation. Yeah, so now the colors are starting to come back a bit more, but I still want more colors. So I'm going to go masking. I'm going to apply a linear gradient down here for the water, and because it selected the boat, I'm going to press on the linear gradient, subtract from mask 1, and then I'm going to select subject, which should be the boat. Yep. And then I'm going to increase the highlights and the shadows. Make it more blue. I kind of want the water to be more blue. And then make it saturated a bit more. And I'm also going to increase the clarity so that the contrast, so that the details of the water is popping out more, okay? And then I'm going to select the sky, also make it a bit more blue. Maybe not that blue, like this. I don't want to get too carried away with it. And then I'm also going to add another linear gradient down here. Not all of the water, just the one in front. And then I'm going to reduce the exposure, just to add a bit more depth in the water. Something like that, and bring the attention more to the center. Select the subject, like the parts of the boat that weren't selected, I'm going to brush over that. It doesn't have to be too precise. And I'm also going to remove the parts that were selected that I don't want to be selected. Again, it doesn't have to be too precise. And I'm going to increase the exposure and then increase the clarity to bring more detail into the boat. I'm also going to increase contrast. So now the boat is popping out a bit more because it has more contrast. I'm going to select the background with a radial gradient, sorry, and then I'm going to subtract the boat again because I don't want it to be selected while I adjust. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to subtract from mask 5, brush, and I'm going to remove the areas that were selected that I don't want to be selected. I'm going to reduce the contrast. Actually, no, I'm going to leave the contrast, and I'm going to increase the saturation a bit more. And I am going to reduce the clarity, bring it down a bit so that the boat stands out more. And then in the sky, I'm going to add a radial gradient, add some artificial light because I think that would look cool. See what that looks like. I'm going to make it a bit warm. Maybe a bit brighter, and maybe dehaze it a little bit so that it's less obvious. Yeah, something like that. And I want to make the plane stand out a little bit more too. So I'm just going to add a slight radial gradient around the plane. And I'm just gonna increase the texture and clarity. Now I'm gonna go color, and I'm going to select the green, increase the hues maybe and make it more saturated. The water's a bit dark, so I'm going to adjust that again. Increase the exposure a little bit. Maybe make it a bit more blue. Nope, never mind, that bit's too much. And then I'm going to go to the boat, and I'm going to duplicate and invert so that everything but the boat is selected. And I'm going to just reduce exposure, just a little bit. Now the boat is just standing out too much, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to reduce the contrast of it more, so it looks more realistic. I might make the back brighter actually. Just make the photo a bit more livelier. But yeah, I guess something like that. Let's go tone curves, and then I'm going to make it a bit more warm in the highlights. Actually, no, I'm not gonna mess with the tone curves for this one. I think I like it just the way it is. Let me see what. Yeah, something like that with. I think for this photo, I do like the less contrasty look. So that's before and that's after. It could be better, but we don't have all day. So the masking was a lot. I know I do get carried away with the masking at times. It usually takes me a couple hours to edit one photo just because I like to go back and forth with everything because I just be overthinking everything. But yeah, that's basically how I edit my photos. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye!